Uh, First of all, I will introduce myself. I am Belén Sotoponce from CESPID at the University of Sevilla. My colleague Daniela Miranda, who was scheduled to chair this session, is, can't be here today, so I will replace her. Well, I'm a PhD student at the University of Sevilla, and my dissertation is based on studying how evaluation processes can enhance empowerment of Roma communities in Europe and in Spain. So this session is named Community-Led Organizations as Drivers for Local and Global Justice, International Case Studies. So we are going to present different research practices that were conducted in Spain and in Italy. And also we have a presentation of Natalia, which will present her study with refugees population in Russia. So I will give the word to her.
Buongiorno, dear participants. Thank you for inviting me, especially Signora Catarina, and for contacting with Ukrainian. And now? Okay. Good? Okay. I'm from St. Petersburg University, from psychology department, and also I'm a member of Women Peace Dialogue platform, which we organized with Ukrainian, Georgian, and Russian women 7 years ago for implementing resolution, UN resolution number 1325, in order to prevent rape during war. And now my speech will be about present situation with the help network for the Ukrainian refugee in Russia. And I would like to say something about the future, about the Russian-Ukrainian contact and future reconciliation. So we should think about future. And since February, more than 1 million Ukrainian refugee and deported citizens of Ukraine have arrived in Russia through the different routes. Almost all of them have traumatic event and survived after very severe situation. And Russian state provide special accommodation and meals for them. But unfortunately, this was absolutely not enough for the beginning of new life and for the coping with the huge trauma they experienced after this aggressive situation. And in Russia, you should know that now it's very totalitarian state. You should know about it, and that all anti-war protests are criminalized. Even 16,000 people now receive a punishment for the anti-war activity. And even 200 receive criminal punishment, even for 7 years in a jail. Could you imagine how people, for them it's very difficult to be a protester, anti-war protester. But 2 days ago, after the announcement mobilization, it was very horrible. we see that 104,000 people were arrested, mainly young women. And unfortunately, the help for the refugee is a monopoly of the ruling party. But independent volunteer from different social community started to help the refugee by organizing a lot of social network with the help of IT technologies. And psychological assistance groups are widespread in Russia, in which they work both in Russian language and Ukrainian language for the refugee who are victim of rapes and other traumatic events. And I am, as a member of St. Petersburg Human Rights Defense Committee, we visited with a special center for refugee, and we see how the situation in it, because many refugees from the Ukraine, from Donbass region, unfortunately supported the war because of the Russian propaganda. Maybe it is very strange, but yes, some Ukrainian people supported this war and said that yes, Putin will help us, and it will be very good situation in Ukraine. So our volunteers mostly are anti-war protester, but refugee support the war. So this is another problem, how people burn out and have a very big problem to help people. So it's contradictory things. And I would like to say that we should contact and support the network with our Ukrainian colleagues. And we never stopped with contacts, and we should continue to with contacts. And what's about future and what's about reconciliation between Russian and Ukrainian side? First of all, we need some condition, special condition. And from my point of view, it's condition the following. First of all, Ukraine should return their all occupied territory. The second, all contribution will be paid for Ukraine from Russian side. And Ukrainian first should decide contacted with Russian people, because I know that many of them rejected to even use the Russian language and to cooperate with Russian-speaking therapists and with Russian-speaking volunteers because of their trauma of the war. Who will participate in the reconciliation process? Who? Because, bless you, it's worth to know that in Russia there are three groups of people: supporter of the war, opponent of the war, and group of the people who did not, cannot to have a position about the war. It's so-called doctors or swamp. Hesitated what to do. And I think we as psychologists should organize the different way of working with every groups. And the main accent was on the doctor or on this web, because these people use the rhetoric of their own interest. Supporter of the war use the rhetoric of the state interest and geopolitical conspiracy theory, and opponent of the war use the rhetoric of the human rights, morals, and against all the war. And that's why we need different working with each group. As for me, I have experience to work with the people concerning the consciousness raising about militarism in Russia. And for me, it was very interesting thing that in one group there were men who were opponent on the war and supporter of the war. And some of them, especially supporter, even did not think about the consequences of the war, because the main interest of their activity is financial factors, because most of them are from poor region of Russia, and some of them even they were very hungry and then visited our workshop just to eat, because they never seen such food in their life. So, and I suppose these people go to the war and unfortunately died in the war. So it's worth to know that the picture of the attitudes to the war is very mosaic, very differentiated, so we should use it. What is possible now, how psychologists work? I have already said that we have numerous independent volunteer group who run social work, medical support, psychological support for refugee and for the anti-war activists. And is it possible a change of attitudes of this support of the war? I think there are two waves. There are possible changing in the attitudes, especially if the economical situation will be worsened, and opposite, it will be another position, because the problem will be a little bit how to say it, a bad thing for their reputation and self-confidence, and even for their values. So it's very difficult situation to work with support of the war. So from my point of view, we as psychology should put all our accent to work with doctors. I think it's more effective will be in future. And if we talk about the system approach, we should work on the different level. First of all, on macro level, meso level, and micro level. And concerning the macro level, I think we should change politics dramatically. How it will be happen in the future, we don't know. We hope that sometimes it happened. And this changing in policy give us the change in rhetoric, because most of the people, Ukrainian and Russia, are under the propaganda, war propaganda. And the meso level is a level of educational institution. And this institution should promote the approach, especially for men and young boys, in emotional and cognitive way to change and to develop their emotional sphere, anti-militarism, first of all, against the toxic masculinity, and micro level, of course, it's working of psychologists. And maybe you know such approach as co-counseling, re-evaluation co-counseling. Who knows about it? It's very good tools for the group to change the attitudes, prejudice, and for discharging and to healing the trauma of the war. The leader of co-counseling is Harvey Jenkins, maybe you know, because in many cities there are such community of co-counseling. It's co-counseling means people counsel each other without hierarchical position, and it's very healing things. So maybe in future we will run such co-counseling groups between Ukrainian and Russian, between support of war and opponent of war of Russian, and even different position inside Ukrainian society, because you know there is the Ukrainian who support war and Ukrainian who especially support the independence of Ukraine. So we should continue with job because one person decided to divide us, and our aim is to work for the future. And in conclusion, many years ago, I was in a anniversary for the 60th anniversary of Human Rights Resolution in Luxembourg Palace, and one MP of France asked me how we do with Putin in order he fulfill the human rights. And I said, I'm psychologist, but I think that you should not buy gas and oil from him. And he said me, no, it's impossible. It's impossible. But now, already 14 years gone. And only now the West try not to buy gas and oil. So we should make more good decision more quickly, I suppose. And and I think we should use all our experience. And you know that the main thing we should do after Tiananmen Square, we should use the experience, and we will. Thank you for your attention. So, maybe you have some questions. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
No question? No question? No?
Everybody knows about what's happened in Russia. So it's very blood present now. So it's very difficult. And it's very difficult to be here for me. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, so thank you very much, Natalia, for your presentation. I think it's very important that you are here because you are giving us a view of what you are living there. So I think it's very important, this presentation, to be here at this conference.
Thank
so
you.
now we will move on with the aim of this symposium. Well, first of all, I would like to introduce CESPID. We work at the University of Sevilla in Spain, and we are a research group, and our main aim is to raise awareness of the oppressive conditions that migrants, refugees, and other ethnic minorities live in Europe and in Spain. And so we will present some experiences. We will start with Sara, that will explain the challenges of migrant community-based organization in Milan, in Italy. And so I will give the word to her.
Hi, thank you, Belen, and good afternoon to everyone. I'm Sara Martinez Damia, and I'm going to present a work that is part of my PhD thesis, and it is a work that I conducted with Daniela Marzana, Virginia Paloma, and Elena Marta. Well, first of all, migration can be defined as an act where people try to pursue a greater capacity of self-determination. However, we know that usually that for those immigrants who achieve to enter in host societies, their arrival is always characterized by many barriers to achieve this self-determination capacity, and that their expectation about improving their life satisfaction are not always met. And in the case of Italy, we know that immigrants live a condition of oppression because literature suggests that the 5 million people that live here in Italy usually experience lower level of subjective well-being in comparison to locals. They experience isolation and have poor social support networks. And moreover, they live everyday discrimination in multiple spaces, such as works, bank accounts, rental agencies, and social services. And finally, media narratives always depict migration as a security problems, and in Italy, immigrants experience exclusionary policies. We decide to focus our attention on migrant community-based organization, starting from the premise that they can be mediating structures between immigrants and host societies. And community-based organizations are defined as mediating structures because they mediate on how individuals engaged with society and with social problems within societies. And in this case, when we talk about migrant community-based organization, MCBOs, we are talking about organization funded and run by immigrants, so where immigrants has a significant presence in the board of directors, and they play a significant role between immigrants and the broader society. For example, they promote intercultural dialogue and reduce prejudice and usually fight for social justice. And literature suggests that this type of organization have positive effects both for host society and for immigrants, because for host society they usually build cultural capital, sense of community, and multiculturalism, as well as they help to counteract exclusionary narratives. While for immigrants, this type of settings can be helpful because they provide material as well as immaterial support for those who arrived, and there are spaces where they can fight for their rights and where their ethnic and cultural identities can be protected. However, recently there are some authors who suggest that we need to pay a critical look to immigrant participation, because in European states, usually participation among immigrants is always promoted. However, we can usually member states have ambivalent attitudes toward this participation, because on one hand, immigrant participation is seen as desirable in order to respect the value of our democracies, and in this way, immigrants are seen as people who can demonstrate to be well-functioning citizens. However, immigrant participation can also be a threat, as changes that might come with it are not always desirable for host societies. So usually within Europe, when we talk about immigrant participation, this topic is approached from an integrative perspective rather than an issue of social justice. And before delving into the research, we want to focus on the challenges that this type of organization have in being effective in their mediating role. And the literature suggests that they usually lack of power and ability to advocate for immigrants' rights, and usually they are ignored from negotiation from public institutions. So they usually risk to perpetuate the status quo instead of fighting it. And our research project aimed to analyze the challenges as well as the coping strategies that MCBOs settled in northern Italy experience, as well as to identify how these challenges were experienced according to some organization-specific markers that I will present. And we collected our data back in 2018, where 2 decrees of security and migration were approved. And we decided to focus our attention in specifically Milan, because there are a lot of migrant community-based organizations, and the majority of all the organizations that there are in Italy are settled there. And we collected data using in-depth interviews with leaders and members, and we also ran some unstructured participant observation of some public events, and we also asked to leaders and presidents of the organization to share with us the bylaws of their organization. And we follow a constructivist gender theory approach, as well as positional maps. And here are some of the details of of the MCBOs that were involved in the research. They were all medium-small organizations, so the number of volunteers range from 1 to 15, and we have an heterogeneous sample, because we decided to focus on organizations that have different type of aims, that, for example, usually do cultural activities. So the aim was to spread the culture of their country of origin, as well as organizations that do mainly advocacy activities, or organizations that focus on social services, linguistic assistance, or legal one. And we also decide to consider different organizations that were funded in different years. So we have historical organizations that were funded like in the 90s, as well as organizations that were more recent. And finally, also regarding to the geographical area of origin of their members, we have organizations that have members that came from South America, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Eastern Europe and Asia. And these organizations were homogeneous, meaning that usually the organization was from Asia, I mean that were people coming from different countries, but all in the same continent. Well, these are our results regarding to the first aim, and we decided to organize the results across 3 different levels: the internal, the interorganizational, and the community level. And within the internal level, the main challenge of this type of organization was to survive, because they have difficulties in having access to funding, as well as to long-term engaged volunteers. And for example, they tell us that usually their work was very stressful, and usually also they started to think and to wonder why they have to go on with the job while others don't. And in front of this challenge, the main coping strategies that they used was a strong leadership. So the president was a very, very important figure, and actually that ran the majority of activities, and this was also one of the reasons why it was difficult for them to grow. And the other challenge was at the interorganizational level, was regarding collaboration, because we found that there was competition among MCBOs, and also a great fragmentation due to different socio-political narratives, because we asked them about how they were perceiving the Italian context, and we found that there were very different perceptions of the context, because, for example, some MCBOs tend to support the blaming migrants narrative that also many locals in Italy supports, but there were others, for example, that suggested that they didn't believe that immigrants in Italy actually live that bad, because I mean in the last years no new real changes have occurred, while there were other organizations that tend to support the barbarization narrative, meaning that they perceive that the context in the last years have worsened a lot, not only in Italy but in worldwide. And in front of the difficulty of collaboration between them, the strategy that they used was international networking. So they recognized the importance to connect, but however, because it was difficult to connect between each other in the same city, they usually connect with others outside the city worldwide. And finally, regarding the last level, we found that they have difficulties to be recognized as civil society actors, because usually they experience oppressive policies and attitudes, and also they face distrust and manipulation by Italian NGOs and general host societies, because they were saying that they usually were called when there was a need for them. And for example, when there was a project that needs a migrant organization to be involved, they were called, but they were not part of the designing of the project. So in front of this, they always say that they have a very strong collective justice orientation, and so they recognize this mechanism, but they will fight again and again in front of the situation. Regarding the second aim, we found that these challenges were not the same for all the organizations, because, for example, the organization that mainly focused on cultural services activities and that were from Eastern Europe and were not very historical usually perceive challenges more at the internal level, while when we have organizations that also involve social service activities, advocacy, and were more historical, as well as came from South America and Sub-Saharan Africa, they tend to perceive more the community and the interorganizational challenges. So what can we say? First of all, that MCBOs usually have a low level of resources and opportunities, and they face emotional distress coming from their work. We found that not only connected to national organization is a problem for them, but also to connect between them can be a challenge. Usually manipulation and tokenism risk to perpetuate the status quo, so they risk to stay in the same system that that at the beginning they were fighting. And finally, there is a great heterogeneity between this type of organization, so we need to avoid to have a stereotype vision of this organization as all the same. And we also need to recognize that there are intergroup competition between them according to the privilege that they have and also to the critical thinking that their members usually develop. So here are some of the, of the suggestions that we think that can be implemented based on these results. First of all, it's important to enhance the human capital of this type of organization. For example, helping them to obtaining funds, but also promoting social marketing to attract new volunteers, also national ones. And also it's important to provide psychological support in order to prevent burnout. Then it's important to strengthen the inter-MCBO's network because it's important that they collaborate between them based on common challenges. And also it's important to raise awareness among national organizations about oppressive power dynamics, and also to increase, for example, the organizational prestige of this type of organization with agreements with university of national institutions, so that they can be seen as real actors within a whole society. These are some limitations of our research, but I mean, I don't know, I know that we short running time. So I want just to conclude that we started from the premise that MCBOs are mediating structures between immigrants and the whole society. But in order for them to really do and have this role, it's important to recognize the challenges that they face and support them overcome them. So these are my contacts, and thank you very much. Juan Carlos, puedes hablar si quieres.
Yes, here I am. El sonido se perdió por un momento. How are you? I wonder if I can share my presentation directly. I think so. Can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So, okay, good afternoon to everyone. My name is Juan Carlos Aceros. I am from Colombia, and I am one of the authors of this presentation called Female Migrant Domestic Workers Organizations as an Opportunity Structure for Sociopolitical Development. Unfortunately, the other two co-authors are not with us today. They cannot accompany us, but I will try to do my best in order to share our work. In order to make it easier, because English is not my mother tongue, I will read it. I know that it is not the funniest way to do this kind of things, but I hope it will be great because we added some subtitles in order to make you easier to follow my speech. So let's start. Domestic work is potentially an oppressive labor context for migrant women who participate in it in destination societies. As domestic workers, migrants often experience unfair work relationships, poor pay or living conditions, and different forms of violence. Community-led organizations are settings in which migrant women can act against this oppression and promote social justice. In Spain, migrant women have created unions, associations, and informal groups for more than 40 years. We have conducted a qualitative study in southern Spain to explore the opportunities that such groups offer to migrant women. The model of sociopolitical development by Watts was used as a basis for analyzing data. Sociopolitical development is the process by which people develop the capacity to critically analyze the conditions in which they live, to understand oppression, and to act to transform it. Central to this process is critical consciousness. This capacity takes the form of a structural analysis of oppressive situations. Critical consciousness increases in turn emotional and intellectual commitment to social change, as well as liberatory actions. According to Watts and Huesos, emotional and intellectual commitment occur when opportunities for actions are limited. On the other hand, liberatory actions occur when opportunities for participation exist. This means that people require social contexts in which they can establish transactions relevant to their sociopolitical development. Those groups and settings in which people can participate and in which resources for liberation are offered to them have been called opportunity structures by Watts and Flanagan. They are of prime importance for migrant populations who are often severely limited in their options for participation in destination societies. Thus, we wonder if migrant associations might operate as opportunity structures, and we suggest that this is the case. In our research, we have obtained some findings in this regard. In 2021, we interviewed 11 activists participating in the Association of Domestic Workers of Seville. This association is the only grassroots organization in the capital of Andalusia aiming to improve the situation of domestic workers. We talked with the participants about their experiences as activists, the effects of their political action in their lives, and the meaningful situations leading them toward activism. As a result of content analysis, we identified that the organization facilitated sociopolitical development by offering migrant women with several opportunities. Let's describe 4 of them that we find as paradigmatic. First of all, we have sharing stories of oppression. Sharing stories of oppression is the process of communicating direct experiences of inequality and abuse of power in the workplace. As activists frequently said, the association gives them a place to tell their stories. Such a place is an interpersonal one. It takes the form of encounters in which women feel secure enough to talk publicly about their labor relationships. Participants consider that such opportunities to talk facilitate emotional relief in women with direct experiences of oppression and trigger feelings of indignation in women without such experiences. In corroboration with previous studies, sharing stories of oppression can be thought as a strategy by oppressed groups to cope with injustice, obtain social support, learn about oppression, and generate commitment to action. Linked to the experience of sharing stories, interviewees also reported a strong sense of community. In the context of the association, women feel that they speak in similar ways about experiences that they share as a group. In interviews, references to a sense of community resonate with the experience of becoming part of the migrant domestic worker class reported by Ruther as outcome of activism by migrant domestic workers. In our data, participants point that such a sense of community provides them with a positive collective identity and drive actions of mutual support and social change. Identification with fellow domestic workers comes with a sense of collective dignity, which means pride of being domestic workers. In parallel, experiences of sisterhood and solidarity linked to sociopolitical action were also mentioned. These findings align with previous research calling attention to sense of belonging as a positive outcome of activism by different groups, including migrants. As a third opportunity, we identified the acquisition of a rights-based approach. The organization provides a context for learning about migrant and labor rights. It offers legal advice, educational opportunities, and rights training, so members learn a rights-based framework that enables them to understand their experiences politically. This approach helps them to view labor abuses as rights violations that can be addressed through labor or immigration law, policy reform, and collective action. So finally, the association provides opportunity to participate in sociopolitical actions. Depending on the intensity with which women engage with activism, they behave as informants, recruiters, volunteers, or leaders. As informants, women are multipliers of the information to which they have access through the organization. As recruiters, they encourage other women to join the association. As volunteers, migrants dedicate their leisure time supporting the association's activities. When they take leadership positions, they assume responsibility for the planning, management, and implementation of collective actions. As you can see, involvement in migrant organizations provides domestic workers with several opportunities. Literature on sociopolitical development highlights the role of educational institutions as opportunity structures for marginalized youngsters. Research on the role of migrants' organizations is scarce. However, we find that such organizations allow migrant women to share their experiences of oppression with others, develop a sense of community, acquire a rights-based framework, and act against injustice. This is possible thanks to the interpersonal context and the learning opportunities the organization offers, and the role structure in which migrants find a place. In the case of these women, engagement in such opportunity structure is remarkable when we consider the multiple limitations they face in terms of their political organization. Future works on sociopolitical development might consider organizations as opportunity structures for members of oppressed groups fighting for justice. A final word, our professional efforts in supporting those groups may focus on making the positive contributions of migrant organizations stronger. In this line, it is important to foster spaces for horizontal dialogue, rights training, and progressive development of capacities to occupy relevant positions in such opportunity structures. We hope that our work will motivate further research and social intervention in this topic. So in this sense, we invite you to download a couple of articles we just published about these topics, and they are products from this joint research we did with Tatiana Duque and Virginia Paloma. So thank you very much, and I will be really happy to hear your comments and questions.
Juan Carlos.
Okay, so now I will share our experience on the project Gitana, which is an initiative that promotes evaluation strategies as empowering methods for women and girls leadership. And it is an initiative which is led by Gazcalo, which is a Spanish Roma organization. Okay, so to contextualize a bit, Roma rights have been consistently violated since their arrival to Europe, and still today, the 80% of European Roma live in extreme poverty. So the context where they live and the context where they grow is extremely unjust. As they live with poor housing conditions, they face barriers to access basic services, and they lack employment opportunities, etc. So all of these oppressive conditions are embedded in anti-Gypsyism, which refers to the specific racism towards Roma people in Europe and in Spain. So this affects especially Roma women and girls, which are especially affected by these oppressive conditions. So, in fact, there is a high percentage of Roma girls who are already married or cohabiting with their partners. So this is the challenge we want to address. One of the reasons that explains this is that motherhood is the only way for Roma women to feel relevant and to matter in their communities. So due to the oppressive mechanisms that they live in, they are pushed to economic exploitation, to poverty, or to the exclusion of social and political spheres. So all of these mechanisms make women invisible from childhood, and in some cases leaving them with no other choice than adopting the roles of being wives, mothers, or caregivers in order to matter to their communities. So this also, of course, has devastating consequences for these girls and these women. In the first place, it violates their right to be girls and condemns them to live in these oppressive conditions forever, almost. Okay, so community-led organizations, their role is essential to address all these challenges, and they must ensure the leadership and participation of Roma women and girls to overcome the inequities that they suffer. So this implies that Roma organizations must have the tools and capacity to evaluate their initiatives, as the evaluation processes are key to empower communities to design and implement actions that are relevant to them and to lead structural and social changes. So this way, Roma organizations can be a perfect scenario to promote Roma women and girls' reproductive justice. So I'm going to share our experience in the Gitana project, which is being implemented in Spain, and which general aim is to empower Roma girls mattering, linking it with girls' gender rights. So this project is being implemented in San Adrián, in Navarra, northern Spain. And some of the characteristics of this context is that it is settled in rural scenarios, which are segregated and marginalized, as their population doesn't have a guaranteed access to basic services or even to cultural activities, for example. So within this context, Gazcalo and other local Roma organizations can play an important role to promote changes in collaboration with researchers. So the Project Gitana is a community-based participatory action research in which all participants are involved in decisions about the actions to be implemented and their evaluation. And using photo voice, participants take photos to represent and to advocate for their future aspirations. So regarding project participants, it involved Gazcalo, which is a Roma community-led organization, 2 Roma women from local communities as facilitators, and 12 adolescent girls from San Adrián. Okay, then on its implementation, as you can see, the objectives and actions go through 3 different ecological levels, which include organizational, community, and individual levels. And then specifically, on the organizational level, the objective was to develop organizational evaluation processes and to consolidate Gazcalo as an empowering community setting for Roma communities in San Adrián. So to achieve this, a local coalition was built, which included Roma families, community leaders, and diverse professionals. Gazcalo also incorporated a reproductive justice approach through the creation of safe spaces for Roma women and girls to participate on decision-making processes and also to lead the initiatives. And lastly, Gazcalo assessed and tailored initiatives process and implementation jointly with all organizational members and researchers. Regarding Roma women in the community, they participated in capacity building sessions on photo voice, on advocacy and evaluation strategies. Then they led and facilitated photo voice with Roma girls and advocated for their gender rights jointly. And lastly, they also participated in the assessment of the initiatives process and evaluation implementation, providing constant feedback and designing and tailoring actions to reach the proposed objectives with Roma girls. Okay, then lastly, to link Roma adolescent mattering to their gender rights, girls responded to two framing questions with photographs. These questions were, what are your dreams and what resources do you need to achieve them? Then they categorized those photographs, defined their future aspirations, and identified their allies. And lastly, with those photographs, they developed actions and recommendations to advocate for better opportunities for their futures, and also they assess their actions to maintain and improve their quality and their impact in the community. Okay, so regarding the preliminary results, they show that developing organizational evaluation strategies can ensure real impacts on the communities, can also ensure sustainability of the initiatives and accountability. Also, local narratives acknowledge Gazcalo as an empowering community setting for Roma communities. Then on the other hand, Roma women were constantly involved in decision-making processes to design actions, implement them, and provide feedback on everything that was being done. So this way, the adaptation of the initiatives to the community's needs was always ensured, and which also fostered the leadership and recognition of these women on their communities. Then finally, the girls reflected their motivation and satisfaction to participate in this project and with the organization Gazcalo. They also consolidated the support they received from their families and from their communities, and built diverse links to expand their social convoys. Also, they developed the ability to design and to adapt the steps to achieve the goals that they had proposed for their future. So, this is an example, as the project Gitana was recognized in the local press, and the photos that the girls made to respond those framing questions were also acknowledged in the local communities. Okay, so then as a conclusion, here are some of the reflections and challenges of these processes. Regarding community-based participatory action research sustainability, there are always some common challenges, which are, for example, the limitation of community participation in the projects and the high dropout rates that we have working with the Roma communities, and especially with girls. Also, we have we have to highlight the need to constantly adapt the process to the community's needs. For example, in Navarra, there was a traffic accident in which a neighbor died, and then all the Roma families and girls were afraid to go to the sessions because someone has just died in their community, so we have to adapt to all these challenges. Then regarding evaluation, this has proved to be an important strategy for community-led organizations to empower communities, as, for example, it gives women and girls the opportunity to lead the initiatives and to use their voice to decide what is important to them. However, there are also some challenges regarding outcome evaluation because sometimes it is very difficult to quantify the results that we obtain, although there is a lot of qualitative information that we can collect and which is similarly very rich. And thank you for your attention. This is all. I hope to hear your comments and questions at the end.
Buenas tardes, buonasera, good afternoon. Ya no sé más idiomas, sorry. Well. ¿Cuál es la mía? ¿Dónde está? No? ¿Dónde está? Aquí. ¿Cómo se pone esto? Thank you. Well, I'm going to present a participatory analysis of equity in educational policies and practices in southern Spain carried out during the pandemic. It is not planified, but was. And the idea is reflecting together about if schools were community setting to leave no one behind. I would like to start here with a question. How many people here have children? Can you? This question, which is the answer for you? It's okay or not? The schools? Bad. And before? Before of the COVID? You know, it's okay? Ah, okay. Okay. Well, I tried to expound some ideas that we found about this. Well, this presentation is based on the results from a community action research based on a work that CESPID did with Mad Africa in a coalition, in a community coalition. And Mad Africa is an NGO, a little NGO settled in Seville that aims to achieve an inclusive and equitable society. And we developed a community research project aimed at defending human rights and social justice and increasing the power of oppressed groups, specifically of migrants from Africa. Okay? Well, the starting point of the project was the major concern of African mothers living in Seville about the racism suffered by their children, especially at the schools. And we identified this in a previous project named Ender One, Raising Voices of African Feminism, that Aloe carried out. And the second project that focused on it, on racism in schools, was Ender Two, raising the voice of African and Afro-descendant Andalusian citizens. For us, name this Andalusian citizen is very different from migrant children. And this is one of the, a little step to change the reality and the imaginary, this social imaginary? I don't know. Well, the educational system, as you know, has been identified as an essential services, not only for the integration or well-being of migrant children, but also for the creation of an inclusive society. For us, it's very important also to work with native people and Andalusian people from always. However, this requires the development of policies that guarantee measures that advance to equity, as well as practices that lend to effective actions and cultural competence in professional and services. But racism pervades educational institutions, affecting not only students' educational outcome, only education, but also their life experiences in a long term. For example, students of a migrant background in host society lag behind their native peers by around 1.5 years. So it's a very big gap. And why? Well, many risk factors has been identified at different ecological levels. Some of them are here: residential segregation, the ghettos, no? Services access barriers, lack of participation, early school leaving, and low participation also of the families. But for us, it's very important this last level, the policy level, that at last from psychologists is not more usual, no? So for us, it's very, very important focus on this level and the interconnection, of course, of the other ecological levels. In this direction, and there too, aims to diagnose the equity of educational policies and practices developed in multicultural communities in Andalusia in relation to ethnic and cultural diversity. We focused on three objectives. The first was analyze the equity of educational policies. It means laws and programs and plans, the official, no? The second is explore how these policies are put into practice, listening the voices of educational professionals and from African mothers, no? Two very different in some things. And the third was collaboratively elaborate recommendations to enhance educational equity and cultural competence in a school, all together. And well, Andalusia, they present witches. You know, if you have the lucky to go to there, but I couldn't. And well, Andalusia is one of the main gateways to Spain and Europe from Africa. And foreign students represent 5.8% of the total. And well, as you know, COVID-19 go to this program and other programs. And it increased this inequality that migrant people suffer in Andalusia and worldwide. No? The framework of this project is the Migrant Integration Policy Index project. I don't know if you know that, but if you don't, you can go to this webpage. It's a very big international project that the objective is analyze the equity in all policies. Education is one, but health, nationality, another. And in Spain, education is one of the lowest punctuation, with access to nationality that is almost impossible in Spain for migrant people. Well, the method was mixed research. based on peer review of public policies, plans, laws, etc. Interviews with professionals and a focus group with mothers, African mothers, okay? Combining all of these results, that this was not easy, we obtained some punctuation about 5 dimensions. The dimensions was the first, equity, mission, values, and objectives, based on explicit in the law, the term equity or something like that. The second was equity in access and education and elimination of barriers to the access. The third was equity in quality of care or cultural competencies. And these 3 dimensions was okay, more or less, but the other 2 was terrifying. One was equity in participation, and the other was equity in quality of care or cultural competence. Well, I will to present the main results, not all, but we can conversate them, representing the strengths and weaknesses in each dimension. In the mission, values, and objectives, all policies, include equity as a value. It's, oh, the equity is very important, blah, blah, blah. But the problem was that there is a very big gap between the redactada, no sé, the law, and the practice, okay? It's almost impossible to combine them. All other strength was this idea of leave no one behind, no? The leitmotif of all politicians was reinforcing during the pandemic, but the gap is real, so okay. On the other hand, the equity in access as a strength, there was measures to facilitate the access and also the permanence of migrant children, like temporary classroom for linguistic adaptation. But the reality is that these measures, they're only available in ghetto schools, not in all the schools that migrant people go. So it's reinforcing this segregation of migrant population. No? Other strength was that all mothers positively evaluate the response of the schools during the pandemic. For example, giving them laptops for continuing the online classes. A weakness was the overload of professionals and NGO that was devastating, no? During this time in COVID. Regarding quality of care or cultural competence, it was very interesting because all professionals interviewed pointed out considered their school as safe space for migrant children, but nevertheless the mothers said the contrary. No? Mothers reported a lot of cases of racism from their pupils, but also from their teachers, families, etc. And they also reported low cultural competence of teachers. Moreover, no specific protocols against racism is redacted in laws and plans. Regarding participation, it was the lowest dimension. Participation in general of families in school is very low. So for migrant people, it's also. No measure to facilitate migrant participation within a school, like, for example, cultural mediators who are from NGOs, but not within the schools. And at last, partnership development in these schools that were from multicultural communities. they have a high level of collaboration between NGOs, associations, etc. But the weakness is that is at outsourcing of resources, not within the centers. And more informal than formal support that migrant people received during the COVID. Then, well, stakeholders recognize that there is a very big gap between the tangible application of equity and the actions within the schools, especially in crisis. And schools work for leaving no one behind during the pandemic, responding even more quickly than other governmental organisms or something like that. And maybe the most important thing is the networking, no? Communitary networking that developed during the pandemic. And of course, the importance of cultural competence of services and professionals that make personal efforts to do it. And no more. If you have any question for all of them, we are. Thank you. Don't be shy. No, okay. I'm the discussant also, so I have one question in the pocket. I think the contribution of this symposium show the great potential of community-led organization, not for leave no one behind during the pandemic, but also, for example, with Natalia, no, we can show other crises like totalitarianism or war. So I think this is important to reflect together about which is this role, no, of community-led organizations, also for us as community psychologists in this community, no? as a part of this kind of community. So my question to all of you, and me included, is what are the main challenges that organizations should make to promote social justice, and how can community psychologists contribute to it, no? to help community-led organizations to do it. So, ¿quién quiere empezar? Juan Carlos, you can speak also. ¿Se puede poner al compañero? Ah, míralo, qué guapo.
Yes, I am here. I am thinking about your question. I don't know, I have one idea about our role in organizations. I think that well, it is clear that, for example, when we developed our research with the Association of Domestic Workers, there was like a prevention from the organization during the first part of our relation. This kind of organization have bad previous experiences with researchers, and I think that that's because we still develop like a sort of extractive research in these organizations, and we don't return something relevant to them. So I think that one of our roles is to really hear what the organizations need in order to organize and develop our research and interventions according to the needs and concerns of those organizations. Sometimes we have this idea, well, we have an idea, a question, a concern, and we want to answer a question in this organization, but we don't hear what they really need. So I think that it is important to return to this idea that to recognize the necessity or to be more open to what the organizations expect, and they need, in what we can really help them, and not suppose that we know what they need. I don't know if I am clear enough. I'm sorry, because my English is not the best.
Thank you.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Juan Carlos, because when I remember that when I approached some organization, that was the case. I mean, they were not willing to collaborate with us, specifically because they did it before, and researchers did not give something to them. I mean, it was just like, oh yeah, I need to do you a favor. And actually, many organizations did not want to participate in the research because of this. So I think that it's really important when you say that, I mean, we need to listen to them, first of all, and like not thinking that we know already what's the best solution for them. And the other thing that I was thinking regarding our results, that I think that there is a great need also for critical thinking training, because we not every immigrants have the same experience, and not every type of organization develop critical thinking, because I mean, depending on the experiences, their activities, the reason why they start to connect with each other, and the reason why they founded the organization are very different. And so I think that there is a space for us as community psychology also to help them develop this critical thinking, and also help them to like connect with each other, in order for those who may have critical thinking to give some training to others, because I mean, it's kind of risky that we go there and I mean, develop critical thinking. And so maybe it's much better that those immigrants and those organizations who already have a high level of critical thinking and are real empowering community settings can help others organizations to achieve the same goal of social justice.
Also, in line with what Sarah was saying, I also think that we as community psychologists need to put efforts also on developing that critical thinking. I think evaluation strategies are very useful for this, because we give organizations tools to assess what they are doing, to assess if it is having real impact on the communities, and if it is really empowering the communities they are working with. So I think it's very important what Sarah just said. And also I wanted to highlight the need to transform some of the community-led organizations, as they have really strong leaders, but that they don't leave a space for the communities to speak for themselves and to really raise their voice to what their real needs are. So sometimes organizations act as representatives of the community they are working with, but they are not empowering really their community. So I think this is also important to take into account.
Well, 5 minutes left. Okay. I would like to hear you, in fact, because my answer, I know that. I don't know if you want to say something, or even in this discussion. No? Okay. So my answer was that, from my point of view, researchers sometimes act with like an aliens. I don't know. It's like we are in other planet, not in the community. So this is the first mistake from my point of view. We are part of the community, so we should position it in our socio-political context, no? So this is the first step. Maybe is develop consciousness about where we are and even what are I? No, I don't know. And advocate for the rights of oppressed people and human rights. And maybe in this direction, develop socially involved action research from community psychologists. I think is usual, but in my university, for example, if you analyze all the researches, universities like, I don't know, a big castle that not look of the problems of the people, no? So for me, this is one of the important things that I think we have to do. Empower us and empower our colleague to fight together against the injustice, no? And this is all, because we can speak all the afternoon. Thank you for being here, and sorry for my Spanglish, Andalusian English, maybe, I don't know. Thank you. Juan Carlos, gracias.
Adiós, Juan Carlos.
Estás muy guapo.
No te
Un gustazo
escuchamos.
verlas. Es una pena no haber podido acompañarlas presencialmente. Espero que lo estéis pasando muy bien.
Sí, muchas gracias.
Y a ver si nos
Esperamos
vemos
verte
pronto.
Sí, por
Sí,
favor.
sí.
En la
Claro
de
que
Uruguay,
sí.
la siguiente es en Uruguay.
Ah, bueno, me queda más cerca. ¿Será que en 2 años?
Sí. Así que ve poniendo la hucha.
En eso estaremos, a ver si vamos con Tata.
Adiós.
Chao.
Adiós, suerte.